Paying taxes hurts, but going to prison because you listed your feral cat as a security guard is just embarrassing. Welcome to the Hall of Fame of American tax failures, where we have geniuses claiming breast implants are stage props and guys trying to deduct arsonists as business consultants. If you enjoy watching other people make expensive mistakes, smash that like button and subscribe right now, because you do not want to miss a single one of these 49 certified disasters. The IRS has zero sense of humor, but luckily we do, so let's get into the madness. 1. A very ambitious, exotic dancer named Chesty Love decided to battle the IRS in a truly legendary showdown. She claimed her massive breast implants were strictly a stage prop and not for personal use because they were too heavy to enjoy. She argued they were just like a carpenter buying a hammer or a painter buying brushes. The tax agents were absolutely confused and tried to argue that she wore them everywhere. But the judge actually agreed with her because nobody would choose to carry that much weight for free. It was a rare victory where the government literally paid for the assets. 2. A struggling business owner with a failing shop decided to get creative with his exit strategy. He hired a local criminal to burn the entire building down so he could collect the insurance money. That part was already illegal, but he made it so much worse on his tax return. He actually listed the payment to the arsonist as a deductible consulting expense on the official forms. He thought the IRS would just glance at the numbers and move on without asking questions. The auditor realized that consulting usually does not involve gasoline and matches. He went from filing taxes to filing for an appeal from a prison cell. 3. A gritty junkyard owner faced a massive pest problem with snakes and rats, threatening his valuable scrap inventory. He decided to adopt a large group of feral cats to patrol the yard at night. When tax season finally arrived, he listed thousands of dollars in cat food as a business deduction for independent security personnel. He argued that the cats were hardworking employees who worked for food instead of a paycheck. The IRS auditor looked at the receipts for Fancy Feast and was surely not impressed by his furry security team. The government ruled that unless the cats filed W-2 forms, they were just pets. 4. A worried father was shocked by the high cost of braces for his son's severe overbite. An orthodontist casually mentioned that playing a wind instrument might help strengthen the jaw naturally over time. The dad immediately bought a clarinet and deducted the instrument and years of lessons as a necessary medical expense. He treated the music teacher like a pharmacist, dispensing a prescription. Surprisingly, the tax court actually sided with the father because the doctor had recommended it specifically for the teeth. It was the only time in history that practicing a screeching instrument saved a family money. 5. A hopeless romantic decided he did not need a legal wedding license to get the tax benefits of marriage. He filed a joint tax return with his live-in girlfriend, claiming they were spiritually united in the eyes of the universe. He told the confused IRS agent that a piece of paper from the city was just a formality he chose to ignore. The government politely explained that tax breaks require actual legal documentation and not just good vibes. He ended up owing back taxes and penalties while his girlfriend wondered why he was so cheap about buying a real ring. 6. A creative side hustler discovered a strange tax loophole usually reserved for mining companies and oil drilling operations. He sold his own blood plasma regularly for extra cash and decided he deserved a tax break for the loss. He claimed a mineral depletion allowance on his tax return, arguing that his body was a natural resource, losing valuable minerals. The courts had to explain that humans are not oil wells, and blood regenerates naturally unlike coal or gold. It was a creative attempt to turn biology into a business write-off, but the IRS drained his bank account instead. 7. A paranoid uncle did not trust banks or the government, so he came up with a foolproof savings plan. He took all his cash earnings and buried them in PVC pipes deep in his backyard garden. He thought if the money was underground, the IRS could not tax what they could not see. The plan failed miserably when he dug it up to buy a bright red Ferrari in cash. The dealership reported the large cash transaction, and the agents showed up at his door immediately. He learned that dirt is great for growing carrots, but terrible for hiding wealth. 8. A defiant protester thought he found the ultimate constitutional hack to stop paying his annual income taxes. He filed his standard 1040 form, but instead of writing numbers, he wrote, "I plead the fifth on every single line." He believed revealing his income would be witnessing against himself, which is protected by the Bill of Rights. The judge was not amused and ruled that filing taxes is a civil duty and not a criminal confession. The man found out the hard way that silence is not golden when you are trying to ignore the federal government. 9. A famous action movie star decided to listen to a shady advisor instead of his own accountants. Wesley Snipes stopped filing tax returns because he was convinced that domestic income earned in America was not taxable. He relied on a bizarre interpretation of the tax code called the 861 argument. He truly believed he had discovered a secret that let him keep all his millions tax-free. The jury did not agree with his interpretation, and the judge sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison. It turns out that fighting vampires is much easier than fighting auditors. 10. A furious business owner finally accepted that he had to pay his $10,000 tax bill, but he wanted to make the experience as painful as possible for the government workers. He drove a truck to the local office and dumped 1 million pennies into the lobby floor. He stood there with a smug grin, waiting for them to start counting his copper payment. The agents simply pointed to a federal rule that allows them to refuse unmanageable forms of payment. He had to scoop up every single coin himself while the security guards laughed at his heavy mistake. 11. An aging actor was struggling to land roles because his teeth were falling out. He bought expensive dentures and tried to write them off as a business tool. He told the IRS that without teeth, he could not speak clearly on stage. He argued they were just like a microphone or a costume. The auditor pointed out that he also used the teeth to eat dinner and smile at his family. The judge ruled that teeth are personal because everyone needs to eat to survive. The poor actor had to pay the full bill and smile through the pain. He walked away with empty pockets. 12. A very organized drug dealer kept perfect records of his illegal cocaine empire. When the police raided his house, they found a ledger listing every sale and every purchase. He was already going to prison, but he decided to fight the tax bill in court. He boldly argued that the money he spent buying the drugs should be tax deductible. He claimed it was the cost of goods sold, just like a grocery store buying milk. The judge was stunned by the audacity of a criminal asking for business perks. He learned that you cannot break the law and ask for a discount. 13. A group of wealthy investors got caught up in the wild ostrich farming craze of the 90s. They poured millions into buying birds that were supposed to breed and create a massive profit. They claimed huge tax deductions for the depreciation of their feathery assets on remote farms. The problem was that half the birds did not actually exist, and the others refused to breed. The IRS inspectors visited the farms and found empty fields instead of a booming business. The investors lost their shirts and realized that giant birds are terrible tax advisors. They were left with nothing but sand. 14. A heavy-set man visited his doctor and received the standard advice to eat more vegetables. He took this suggestion very literally and started eating at a salad bar every single day. When tax time came, he piled up his lunch receipts and deducted them as medical expenses. He truly believed that the lettuce and cucumbers were prescribed medication for his health. The tax court had to explain that food is a necessity for life and not a deductible pill. He was left with a high tax bill and a very serious hatred for croutons. He never looked at a salad the same way. Again, 15. A greedy neighbor noticed how much money parents saved with the child tax credit. He decided to invent a few kids of his own, even though he lived alone. He filled out his tax return using the names and social security numbers of the children next door. He thought the government computers were too stupid to notice the duplication. The real parents filed their taxes, and the system immediately flagged the fraud. The man tried to play dumb, but the agents were not laughing at his imaginary family. He traded his quiet house for a crowded cell with real roommates. 16. A wealthy business consultant, tired of paying high taxes, claimed he had taken a religious vow of poverty. He told the government he was now a monk and all his income belonged to his church. The investigators looked closer and found that the church was just a bank account he controlled. He was using the holy funds to pay for his mortgage and luxury car payments. The judge ruled that a vow of poverty usually involves actually being poor. He was forced to pay back every cent, and his spiritual journey ended in bankruptcy court. He prayed for a refund, but it never came. 17. A savvy entrepreneur wanted to hide his profits in a tax-free tropical paradise. He set up a corporation in the Cayman Islands to bill his American company for consulting services. He sent millions of dollars to this foreign entity to wipe out his taxable income at home. The IRS discovered that the foreign headquarters was literally just a small rented mailbox. There were no employees and no desks, and certainly no consultants. The man realized that mailing checks to a metal box is not a brilliant legal strategy. The only thing he successfully hid was his common sense. 18. A rebellious taxpayer decided to see if he could trick the massive IRS computer system. He filled out every single box on his tax return with the number 0. He assumed the machine would just scan it as a year of no activity. He thought he was invisible because he technically filed the paperwork on time. The computer instantly flagged the return as frivolous because he clearly had a job and a mortgage. The IRS sent him a penalty letter instead of a refund check. He found out that trying to be a ghost in the system just makes you a target. 19. The very first winner of the hit show, Survivor, walked away with $1 million cash. Richard assumed the television network had already handled the tax situation for him. He spent the money freely and never bothered to declare the winnings on his annual return. The IRS noticed the discrepancy and wondered why a millionaire was paying 0 taxes. He tried to argue in court that the show had been unclear about the rules. The jury did not buy his excuse and voted him off the island and straight into prison. It was the most expensive reality check in television history. 20. A frustrated artist decided to pay his tax bill in the most annoying way possible. He withdrew thousands of dollars in small bills and spent weeks folding them. He turned each bill into a tight origami crane and packed them into shipping boxes. He delivered the flock of paper birds to the tax office with a smug smile. The clerks were forced to unfold every single bill carefully before they could count the payment. They wasted hours of time, but they eventually processed the money. He proved his point, but he also wasted weeks of his own life folding paper. 21. A wealthy yacht owner tried to convince the government that his luxury boat was actually a floating office building. He listed the vessel as a second home, which is technically legal, but then he got greedy. He claimed the open-air sun deck was his primary workspace, so he could write off the fuel and maintenance costs. The auditor visited the boat and noticed a margarita blender where the computer should have been. The government decided that tanning and fishing do not count as consulting work. The man was forced to pay the back taxes plus penalties and admit his floating office was just a party boat. 22. A frustrated landlord had a tenant who refused to pay rent or leave the property. He decided that the legal eviction process was too slow, so he hired a hitman to solve the problem. The hitman failed to do the job, but the landlord still paid him a large fee. The landlord then listed the payment on his tax return as a professional consulting expense for eviction services. The IRS auditors were shocked to see a violent crime listed as a business deduction. The landlord went to federal prison because you absolutely cannot write off the cost of hiring a bad assassin. 23. A rich family decided they wanted to enter the prestigious world of horse breeding to save money. They bought a beautiful racehorse and claimed they were starting a serious business to sell foals. The problem was that they never actually bred the horse and only rode it for fun on sunny weekends. They tried to deduct the expensive stable fees and vet bills as business losses against their other income. The tax court called it a hobby because a business usually tries to make money. The family learned that an expensive pet does not become a tax shelter just because you buy it a saddle. 24. A deeply paranoid man spent his savings building a massive concrete bunker in his backyard. He was terrified of nuclear war and wanted to be prepared for the end of the world. He tried to deduct the entire cost of the construction as a medical expense for preventative care. He argued that the shelter would prevent him from getting radiation sickness in the future. The IRS pointed out that medical deductions are for existing illnesses and not for imaginary apocalypses. The man was left with a very expensive concrete hole in the ground and a full tax bill to pay. 25. A grieving daughter found a gruesome way to keep her household income steady after a tragedy. When her mother passed away, she decided not to call the funeral home or the authorities. She placed the body in a deep freezer and kept filing tax returns in her mother's name. She continued to cash the monthly Social Security checks and pretended everything was normal for years. The authorities eventually grew suspicious when the mother had not been seen by a doctor in a decade. The daughter traded her frozen scheme for a warm prison cell in a serious charge of wire fraud. 26. A history buff thought he found the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card in the library. He refused to pay his federal income taxes because of a spelling error from 1913. He argued that the state of Ohio had not properly ratified the 16th Amendment due to a typo. He told the judge that this mistake made the entire tax system illegal for every American citizen. The court rolled its eyes and called the argument completely frivolous and a waste of time. He learned that a 100-year-old typo does not cancel your modern debt to the government. 27. A professional gambler hit a massive jackpot but did not want to pay taxes on the winnings. He went to the racetrack and started digging through the trash cans for losing tickets. He gathered thousands of dollars worth of other people's failures to claim them as his own losses. He thought the IRS would believe he had lost all his money betting on slow horses. The investigators checked the timestamps and realized he could not have made those bets. He was caught red-handed with dirty garbage in his pockets and a felony tax fraud charge on his record. 28. A suburban homeowner was tired of paying property taxes and wanted a holy exemption. He went online and became an ordained minister of a church that he invented himself. He declared his ordinary 3-bedroom house a parsonage and his grocery bills as church expenses. He was the only member of the congregation, and the sermons were just him watching football. The local government was not fooled by his sudden spiritual awakening and demanded the money. He realized that calling your living room a sanctuary does not make you a monk in the eyes of the law. 29. The famous actor Nicolas Cage found himself in a financial hole involving a dinosaur. He entered a bidding war with another celebrity and bought a rare Tarbosaurus skull for a massive sum. It turned out the skull had been stolen from Mongolia, and he had to return it for free. The financial loss combined with his reckless spending led to a $6 million tax lien. He had to sell his castles and comic books just to satisfy the IRS debt. It was a harsh lesson for the star that buying stolen fossils is a terrible way to manage your portfolio. 30. A very angry taxpayer wanted to send a message along with his final payment. He wrote a check for the full amount he owed but decided to add a bodily fluid. He pricked his finger and smeared a small amount of blood on the paper to signify his rage. He thought it was a poetic protest against the government taking his hard-earned money. The IRS treated the letter as a biohazard and refused to process the payment at all. He faced massive fines and threats of jail time for mailing a biological weapon instead of a simple paper check. 31. A vain news anchor was terrified of going bald on high-definition television. He bought several expensive custom hair pieces to cover his receding hairline and look young again. When tax season arrived, he deducted the toupees as a necessary business expense for his career. He argued that he only wore the hair while he was reading the news on air. The judge asked the man if he removed the hair immediately after work like a hard hat. The anchor admitted he wore it to dinner and the grocery store, so the deduction was denied. He learned that vanity is a personal cost, and the government does not subsidize bad hair days. 32. A shady construction company was trying to secure big contracts in foreign countries. They paid massive bribes to local officials to grease the wheels and get the permits approved faster. The accountant boldly listed these illegal payments as necessary business commissions on the company tax return. He treated the bribes just like paying for office supplies or electricity bills. The IRS auditors were shocked because the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act explicitly bans these payments. You simply cannot break federal law and then ask for a tax discount on the crime. The company faced huge fines, and the executives realized that corruption is not a deductible business strategy. 33. A dishonest rancher saw a golden opportunity to abuse the agricultural tax credit system. He filed a claim for hundreds of cattle that he said had wandered off or died. He wanted a massive refund to cover the loss of his valuable livestock inventory. The tax investigators decided to look at satellite imagery of his farm from the previous years. The photos showed empty fields and absolutely no cows grazing on the land at all. He had invented an entire ghost herd just to steal money from the government. The judge sent him to prison, where the only wandering he could do was around a small exercise yard. 34. A wealthy patient was feeling very stressed and decided to treat himself to some luxury. He bought expensive antique Navajo rugs to decorate the floors of his large mansion. He tried to deduct the cost as a medical expense by claiming the beautiful patterns soothe his mind. He argued that looking at the art was a form of necessary therapy prescribed by himself. The tax court was not convinced that walking on wool was a medical treatment. They ruled that home decor is not the same as a prescription drug or surgery. He had to pay the full tax bill and find a cheaper way to relax. 35. A cunning business owner wanted to shift his income to a lower tax bracket. He decided to hire his 4-year-old son as a legitimate employee of the firm. He paid the toddler a salary of $15,000 for office cleaning and answering phones. The IRS auditor asked how a child who could barely speak was managing administrative tasks. The father claimed the boy was a prodigy who was very good at tidying up trash. The government did not believe the story and disallowed the entire salary expense immediately. The dad learned that you cannot use your children as human tax shelters until they are old enough to work. 36. A defiant protester walked into tax court with a truly bizarre legal strategy. He told the confused judge that he was not actually a person under the law. He claimed to be a sentient, free-roaming biological entity, and therefore tax laws did not apply. He argued that the tax code only applied to artificial corporate persons and not living souls. The judge looked at him and simply asked if he used public roads and services. When the man said yes, the judge ruled that he was definitely a person who owed money. He left the courtroom with his new identity as a broke inmate in a federal prison. 37. An early crypto investor made millions of dollars when the price of Bitcoins skyrocketed. He did not want to pay capital gains tax, so he told a lie. He claimed he had lost the password to his digital wallet and could not access the funds. He told the IRS the money was gone forever in the digital void. But agents noticed he was buying luxury houses and cars with cash wire transfers. They realized he was slowly cashing out the crypto while pretending to be locked out. He found out that the blockchain is a public ledger that tracks every single lie you try to tell. 38. A reality TV star named Mike. The situation tried to live his catchphrase tax-free. He deducted his gym memberships and tanning sessions and laundry costs as business expenses. He argued that looking good was his entire job, so the government should pay for it. He also failed to report millions of dollars in appearance fees he earned at clubs. The IRS did not care about his abs or his fresh haircut. They indicted him for tax fraud and sent him to federal prison for 8 months. He realized that in the real world you cannot gym tan and laundry your way out of a felony indictment. 39. A disorganized man managed to go 10 full years without filing a single tax return. When the IRS finally caught up with him, he tried the most childish defense possible. He looked the agents in the eye and claimed he genuinely forgot taxes were an annual event. He argued that his memory was bad, and he thought he had paid them already. The judge reminded him that April 15th happens every single year without fail. Ignorance of the law is never a valid excuse for keeping all your money. He was ordered to pay a decade of back taxes plus massive penalties for his convenient amnesia. 40. A professional bodybuilder spent thousands of dollars on specialized bronzing oil for competitions. He tried to deduct the greasy product as a necessary business supply on his tax return. He told the auditor that he could not work without being shiny and tanned. The IRS ruled that unless he walked around wearing the oil 24 hours a day, it was personal. They compared it to a lawyer trying to deduct his suit or a teacher deducting makeup. The muscle man lost the case and had to pay the tax. He learned that looking like a glazed donut is a choice and not a tax-deductible requirement. 41. A lazy schemer wanted a massive refund without doing any actual work during the year. He invented a completely fake job at a made-up company. He filed a return claiming he earned huge wages and had $50,000 withheld for taxes. He sat back and waited for the government to send him that money back as a refund check. The IRS computer system immediately checked the employer database and saw the company did not exist. Instead of a check, he got a knock on the door from armed federal agents. He learned that inventing a fake boss is the fastest way to meet a real prosecutor. 42. A gas station owner wanted to crush his competition and sell more fuel. He decided to give away free beer to every customer who filled up their tank. He deducted the cost of the beer as a business promotion expense on his tax forms. The auditor pointed out that giving open alcohol to drivers is actually a serious crime. The tax code specifically says you cannot deduct expenses related to illegal activities. The owner lost his deduction and also lost his liquor license in the process. He found out that promoting drunk driving is bad for business and terrible for your taxes. 43. A cheap taxpayer wanted a big charitable deduction without giving away any real money. He gathered trash bags full of old dirty socks and underwear with holes in them. He donated the garbage to Goodwill and assigned a value of $10 to every single pair. He claimed a deduction of thousands of dollars for items that belonged in a dumpster. The IRS auditors know that used socks are not worth the price of gold. They audited his return and made him pay penalties for inflating the value. He realized that charity begins at home, but tax fraud ends in court. 44. A stubborn man refused to pay his taxes because he hated the Federal Reserve. He wrote a letter claiming the US dollar was fake money because it was not backed by gold. He argued that since he was paid in imaginary paper notes, he owed zero real tax. The IRS did not care about his economics lesson and seized his very real car. The judge told him that dollars are legal tender whether he likes them or not. He was left walking home while the government sold his vehicle for the fake money he hated. He learned that philosophical debates do not pay the bills. 45. A conspiracy theorist tried to pay his tax bill using magic words instead of cash. He took the official IRS bill and pasted a postage stamp on the corner. He wrote "accepted for value" across the document and mailed it back to the agency. He truly believed this secret legal trick would cancel the entire debt instantly. The IRS clerks treated the paper like trash and continued to add interest to his balance. He eventually faced wage garnishment and a frozen bank account for his trouble. He discovered that you cannot pay federal debts with a stamp and a red pen. 46. The legendary singer Willie Nelson found himself in deep trouble due to bad advice. He invested his earnings in a tax shelter that the IRS later declared illegal. He suddenly owed $32 million in back taxes and penalties to the government. He had no cash to pay, so he had to release a special album called The IRS Tapes. All the profits from the record went directly to the government to pay off his massive debt. He sang his way out of trouble, but it took years of hard work. It was the only time the IRS ever became a music producer. 47. A groom was shocked by the high price of catering for his upcoming wedding reception. He decided to invite 200 friends but call them potential business clients. He labeled the wedding reception as a professional shareholder meeting on his tax return. He deducted the food and the wine and the band as a networking expense. The auditor looked at the guest list and saw it was just his college buddies and family. The government ruled that a wedding is a personal party and not a corporate event. He had to pay for his own cake, and the tax penalty too. 48. A wealthy business owner wanted to buy his wife expensive gifts without spending his own money. He bought her 3 luxury mink coats and tried to deduct them as advertising costs. He argued that she wore the coats to dinners where she met his clients. He claimed she was a walking billboard for his company whenever she wore the fur. The tax court laughed and said the coats were clearly for her. Personal warmth and fashion. He was forced to pay the tax and admit he was just cheap. He learned that treating your spouse like a marketing prop is not legal. 49. A young man bought a flashy sports car that he could not really afford. He came up with a plan to write off the car as a business vehicle. He put a pizza delivery sign on the roof for one day and took a picture. He told the IRS that the Ferrari was used exclusively for delivering hot pizzas. The auditor checked the mileage log and saw he had never delivered a single pie. The government denied the deduction because a 2-seat sports car is terrible for carrying pizzas. He was stuck with a car payment he could not make. Well, there you have it. Proof that the only thing more certain than death and taxes is the audacity of people trying to dodge them. If you learned absolutely nothing legal but enjoyed watching these financial train wrecks, smash that like button and subscribe to Brain Fumble right now. Make sure you hit that bell notification or the IRS might just audit your subscription feed next. Now tell me in the comments which one of these geniuses was the absolute dumbest. Was it the guy who hired a hitman for a write-off or the lady deducting her own implants? Let me know down below.